Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. In this episode, we're focused on redistricting. What are the chances Prop 50 passes, giving Democrats a chance to gain seats in California? And what specific districts and candidates will be affected by the new map? We'll take a look at it all with help from Melanie Mason of Politico. Buckle up. I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan political analysis for more than 40 years. I spent Saturday downhill mountain biking a couple hours west of D.C. at Bryce Resort in Virginia's 6th District, which is represented by Republican Ben Cline.
I'm Jacob Rubashkin, deputy editor of Inside Elections, and I'm currently in Half Moon Bay, California, in the 16th District, represented by Democrat Sam Liccardo.
Really roughing it there, Jacob. Why are you there?
Well, I am here for a panel discussion with the Public Affairs Council this morning, as of taping, alongside former Virginia State Senator and 2017 Lieutenant Governor nominee Jill Holtzman-Vogel, now a Republican lawyer extraordinaire for campaigns and party organizations across the country.
Nice. And we are just a few days from the elections next week, depending on when you all listen to this. Where can people find you on election night?
Primarily at home on my couch, but for at least a little bit, I'll be switching between two different live streams for election nerds. So the GD Politics podcast, hosted by Galen Druk, formerly of 538, he'll be doing a live stream going over the results throughout the evening that I will be participating in, and the folks at DDHQ are also putting together a live stream hosted by former NBC anchor Chuck Todd and former 538 as well, if you're seeing a trend here, elections analyst Jeffrey Skelly. So I'll be on that for a little bit throughout the night as well. And otherwise, I will be tweeting about the results and watching them come in with the rest of us.
Always worth the tweet follow if you're not following Jacob already, which most of you are. Jacob is the Twitter star. I still call it Twitter. Yeah. And I will be, I think, doing an hour of coverage from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern time for CBN News, where I did election night coverage in 2024. So if you are not tired of us on this podcast and you want more, there are lots of other opportunities. So
you could 3-screen it if you really wanted to.
If you do that, send me a picture and we'll talk about
how are they going to take a picture? All their screens are
everyone's got a lot of
devices. Take a picture. Yeah.
Everyone's got a lot of devices now. Who knows? But all right, let's jump in. Before Melanie joins us, let's do some headlines. Jacob, what should folks not miss?
Virginia Democrats are launching a last-minute attempt to redraw the Commonwealth's congressional map before the 2026 midterms to squeeze at least 2 Republicans out of their seats. Nathan, your Ben Cline reference is fitting because he might be the last Republican in Virginia if Democrats have their way there. The plan involves 2 votes in the state legislature, one of which has to happen before next week's election. So sometime in the next 4 days. I believe it passed the state house as of taping, but not yet the state Senate. And then after it passes a second time after the election, it will go to the voters who will have to approve it in a referendum early next year. That would empower lawmakers to draw a new map for temporary use. This differs from the California redistricting we'll get into because there's no map in Virginia currently. Voters would be voting to essentially give lawmakers a blank check when it comes to redistricting and to redraw the seats as they see fit.
it's a multi-step process, to say the least. We'll see if they're able to pull it off. With significant pressure from the White House, Republicans in Indiana are moving forward with redistricting, as they are they're going to likely attempt to gain 2 additional seats from the Hoosier states. The only 2 Democrats in the delegation right now are Congressman Frank Mervan and Andre Carson. So it's the White House has had to put on more pressure than in other areas, but it looks like at least Republicans will get that map done.
Yeah, we'll see. The state house leaders say they have the votes. The state senate leaders say they don't have the votes. One of them will be right. One of them will be wrong. And we'll find out soon enough. But in Illinois, it's a slightly different picture. All 14 of the Democratic members of the Illinois congressional delegation have released a statement urging the state legislature, which is controlled by Democrats, to redraw their congressional map after House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries traveled to Springfield to sell Democrats on a redraw. They're running into some roadblocks, though, from state legislators, especially in the state legislative Black Caucus. State Senator Willie Preston, who is the leader of that group, has been very steadfast in his opposition to redrawing the Illinois map, which is already fairly gerrymandered in Democrats' favor, and to redraw it would possibly involve diluting Black political power in the Chicago area.
Yep. Maryland State Senate President Bill Ferguson announced Democrats in the state will not move forward with redistricting and pass up on the opportunity to attempt to gain 1 additional Democratic seat. That's a blow for Democrats who are trying to find places, such as Illinois, to counter what Republicans are doing around the country. When you boil it down, the redistricting is a very fluid situation, but it looks like Republicans will at least have a net benefit of a handful of seats or more in terms of seats that are drawn to help Republican candidates in November, making it a little bit more difficult for Democrats to get the majority. I want to welcome back our guest, Melanie Mason of Politico. It's been too long, Melanie, but welcome back to the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Now, I think from the last episode, we learned that you grew up, episode 15, by the way, those of you who want to go through the archives, that you grew up in California's 32nd district in Southern California. So tell us another district where you spent time as a kid.
Yeah, so I mean, because I'm LA born and bred and now live in LA, there's not like a ton of geographic variety. But the one thing I like to tell people is that I spent my summers in Bemidji, Minnesota as a kid. I went to summer camp up there, which I think a lot of people are confused by how an LA kid ended up in very northern Minnesota. Like we were basically at the Minnesota-Canada border. But yes, spent a lot of lovely days at Big Wolf Lake in Minnesota. And I have my Bemidji State University like hockey sweatshirt to prove it somewhere. So that's my Midwestern credibility.
So was this a reward or punishment for you?
It was a reward. Summer camp was great. And it was actually, I think, really good for like a city kid to get out into truly the middle of I don't want to say the middle of nowhere, but to the backwoods of Minnesota, I'd say, where you're just like getting pummeled by mosquitoes and there's no electricity and it was, kind of a roughing it camp, but in a good way. And I think it always was like a good level reset before I came back to the city and was, in middle school and high school there. So I look back very fondly at my time there.
And I think that's now Minnesota's 8th district. Did we say that? Represented by Pete Stauber, Iron Range. I remember that district. I wrote about it, years ago. And there was a candidate named Stuart Mills. And I wrote, this was based on talking to a source, that Stuart Mills had a Brad Pitt-like quality. And that kind of blew up and went, I'd say viral, as viral as a political handicapping story can get. But anyway, maybe we'll try to find a link to that. That's my connection to the Iron Range.
Was that a service or a disservice to his ambitions?
I think it probably was either net neutral or net negative. I mean, in that district, as Melanie, as you pointed out, this is not, you don't want to be the clean cut, it's a more of a rugged district, which, but he was rich. His family owned the Mills Fleet Farm stores, and so he was, I think, trying to get away from the perception that he was out of touch. But anyway, hopefully, I'm sure he listens to this podcast. I apologize for interjecting myself into your race, Stuart, if you're listening. Now, before we get started, actually, both of you are in California, but Melanie, we're taping on Wednesday. World Series is happening. Did you happen to be able to get to go to any of the games?
I did. I was at Tuesday night's game, which was not a great game for the Dodgers. But I think all of us collectively, and I'm going to say this as a fan, but also I'm going to say the players too, were so drained after that 18-inning game the night before, which was just so incredibly epic. So it was weird. I mean, going to a World Series game is incredible. It's such a great honor to be able to go, but it almost felt like a regular season game because everybody was just so tired. You could just feel it. Everybody was wiped out.
And before that, NLCS, there was a big game. What about that one?
Yeah, I mean, not to brag or anything, but no, I got to be in person for the NLCS Game 4, where Shohei Ohtani made history and played the best baseball game that anybody's ever played. Essentially, struck out 10 batters and hit 3 home runs, and it was probably one of the coolest things I've ever witnessed. I was with my dad, who has had an incredible run of seeing historic Dodger games. Like, he's seen Sandy Koufax's perfect game and Kirk Gibson's 1988 home run. And even he was turning to me and saying, I've never seen anything like this. It was pretty special.
Wow.
Well, it's crazy that Sandy Koufax has been there, right? I mean, he's
He's
alive and watching the games.
Stayed for all 18 innings this week. So I guess if Sandy has the endurance to do it, then the rest of us do too.
Yeah, nobody has any excuse.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, let's jump in. So the big battle in the 2026 midterm elections will be the fight for the House. Democrats technically need a net gain of 3 seats to capture the majority, but Republicans are pushing that number higher by redistricting as many states as possible, including Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina thus far. Democrats countered by redrawing California, but that new map needs to be approved by voters on Tuesday. Here's a final ad from the pro-Proposition 50 crowd.
California, with Prop 50, you have the power.
You have the power to stand up to Donald Trump.
You have the power to protect reproductive freedom.
You have the power to stop election rigging.
You have the power to give America a fair midterm.
You have the power to restore checks and balances.
You have the power to stand up for everyone being erased by this president.
For all of us in all 50 states.
Yes, on 50.
Melanie, typically ballot measures can be tough to pass, but it looks like Democrats are going to be successful with this. I guess, do you disagree? And was the outcome ever in doubt for this map passing?
I think, look, everybody hates to make political predictions now, but every indication we've seen, both in public polling, what I'm hearing internally from both campaigns, is that this thing looks likely to pass, and probably with a pretty healthy, 55, 56% margin. So, it's unlikely to be a squeaker. And you're right, ballot measures are hard to pass in California. I think that in general, the default for a lot of voters is no. That's why they say when you start a ballot measure, you should start at about 60% support, because you should assume that people will fall off over time. And that's not what happened here, which I think is what's really interesting, is that it feels a little anticlimactic how this is playing out. But the truth is that they started this campaign, the first poll that they sort of put out into the ether publicly, it was at 52%. I mean, that's not a barn burner. And so what I think has been so interesting about this race is that, yes, it's a ballot measure. Yes, it's about something that's kind of wonky about redistricting, but it's played out like a candidate race in some senses, in which it's become very nationalized, very partisan. And so this ad that you played, where it's kind of like the Avengers Assemble of all the Democrats, I think speaks to the fact that this isn't really about congressional district boundaries. This is about a much larger existential fight for Democrats nationally.
Yeah, and Jacob, you've been very bullish on it passing from the outset. I think because of what Melanie was talking about, but talk about why, you thought that this was going to be successful.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think Melanie, you hit all the same points I would make with the addition that, I think this ballot measure feels different than the kinds of things we typically see as a ballot measure in California or in most states where you've got issue specific, somewhat esoteric or not easy to kind of sum up in one sentence type of measures. You've got 5 to 8 of them on any given ballot in California, right? You're drowning in ballot measures when you look at the physical paper ballot that voters receive. And so this, unlike those, this ballot measure is very easy to understand as a proxy between Democrats and Republicans. If you vote for it, Democrats win 5 more seats in the House. If you don't vote for it, they don't. And everyone knows what's going on in Texas because it says right there in the ballot measure language that Republicans just did this in Texas. And California is a Democratic state. So ultimately, right, if you were to go and poll California and say, well, do you want Democrats to win the House or not? A majority of California voters are going to say they want Democrats to win the House. And Newsom, I think, was very shrewd early on in framing this race in that way. And Republicans didn't have a good answer to that because ultimately the thing that Democrats want in 2025 is to fight Trump, is to stand up to Trump and Republicans. That is the driving force behind all of the Democratic energy right now. It's not liberal versus moderate or, conservative, progressive. Those are secondary at most dynamics in Democratic Party politics right now. The fundamental question is, what are you doing to fight Trump? And this is the first time that voters anywhere in the country really have the opportunity on the Democratic side to do something that actually hurts Trump and the Republicans, which is take away 5 seats in the House from them. So of course it was going to pass because this is California we're talking about, and it's a very Democratic state. And whatever sort of high-minded anti-gerrymandering fair districts argument the Republicans wanted to make, Democrats they're just not buying that anymore. Maybe in 2016, when they go low, we go high, Democratic Party would have agreed. But in 2025, after the last decade, good luck. I mean, I can understand why they're essentially waving the white flag on this ballot measure.
And Melanie, is there anything that you've heard from Republicans about what they could or would have done differently, or ways they would have handled it to stop it? Or is this just the case of it's a Democratic state and this is what's happening in California, similar to where Republicans are just kind of running roughshod over Democrats in Republican states?
I think that what they will say is, we thought we'd have more money. And in fact, they were saying that they would have more money. I mean, Kevin McCarthy was telling people that he was going to raise $100 million. Now, since then, since he hasn't been able to pull that in, he has since disputed it. But my colleagues and I have talked to the people who heard it from him. So they were really bullish about the idea that if this was going to be the Democrats' proxy war, that they would be able to get sort of national Republicans to get engaged. And I think, again, to Jacob's fight, if this is just a red team, blue team fight, in California, the blue team wins. But with more money, they may have been able to actually chip away at maybe the consolidation on the blue team side, for example, because there are some Democrats, I think, who do respond to the 2 wrongs don't make a right argument. And, these are the kind of good government types. And so there is a universe where I think that they could have messaged maybe to those people, maybe to the people who were saying, like, they say this is going to stop Trump. It's not even really going to stop Trump. And maybe fracture that Democratic consolidation. And quite frankly, they didn't even really try. And I think part of that is because you had sort of an unnatural, strange bedfellows situation going on the no side. You had Charles Munger, who is a longtime Republican, but sort of a good government Republican. I mean, he was the one who really backed this independent redistricting commission in the first place. He's not really a Trump guy. He sort of has receded from the party as the party has become more Trump aligned. He was the one that was putting in a lot of this initial funding, but they were sort of waiting to see, well, where does the sort of Trump and McCarthy and those sort of elements of the party come in? And these are not natural allies. I have to wonder if there was a lot of rowing in the same direction or if just kind of a difference of opinions. But I think because of that, it just felt very muddled on the no side. And I think you saw that in how the fundraising played out and then also just how their overall messaging went.
Yeah. I think Republicans, maybe if this were kind of a California versus Texas, and that was the whole universe of redistricting, you might imagine that kind of moral high ground argument having a little bit more purchase. But to me, it seems difficult to see how every week there's a new story of a Republican state that's redrawing a map. First, Missouri, and then North Carolina, and, Indiana, the constant pressure campaign there, and Ohio. Even if you were making the argument to California voters, about taking that good government route, they're also seeing all these news stories about Republicans continuing to march on redistricting elsewhere, not just in Texas, but around the country. And I don't know. I guess I'm skeptical that ultimately they could have pulled it off. Maybe it would have been closer, but it seems like, with the benefit of hindsight, this was always set up to pass muster.
I will say, though, that there was one element of the messaging that they sort of leaned into, but again, I don't think they executed it very well. But yes, there is the moral high ground stuff, but there is a rallying point that Republicans would agree with, a lot of independents would agree with, and even some Democrats, which is just the idea of politicians drawing their own lines. Nobody likes that. And I do think that was the type of messaging that, quite frankly, the folks on the yes side, they saw it. They tested that. They were trying to guard against it. But there was also, they could have made Newsom a little bit more of a main character than they actually did. They could have said, look, Newsom is just doing this to try and launch a presidential campaign. They could have had a lot more fun with the idea of these politicians were drawing their own maps and picking their own voters. And again, I think that is something that, yes, for the Democrats in the state, probably would not hold a ton of purchase. But, MPP, no preference, party preference voters, is a really sizable block in the state. And those are, by the way, the voters that were not super into Newsom all that recently. They're also not super into Trump. And so what I think we found out is that anti-Trump galvanizing message, not only did it bring all the Democrats together, but I think that it broke off enough independents who are maybe agnostic on Newsom, but also really are not happy with these early months, or I guess this first year of the Trump administration. And again, that anti-Trump messaging just really hit with them.
They could have said that Newsom drew the map on a napkin while eating at French Laundry or whatever. But Newsom, I would say that just a couple of days ago, when he reportedly asked donors or told donors to stop giving money, stop donating. I've been covering races for a long time. You do not hear that very often. So I thought that was, my ears perked up or eyes perked up online when I saw that. Oh, wow, it takes a lot for a politician to stop asking for money.
Well, and what did he get out of that? He got a bunch of headlines from it. And, we have, my colleague and I at Politico have an analysis about this, which will be coming out this week, about how many more new to Newsom donors he brought into the fold with this ballot measure campaign. And one of the things when I talk to sort of digital strategists who don't work with Newsom, but they credited the Newsom team, is they said, doing things like that actually earns you a lot of credibility with the folks on your list, because everybody knows that when you're getting 7 emails a day and 10 text messages a day saying we're going to lose when they're actually winning, it just makes the people on your list not want to trust you. So doing something like that, it got a lot of earned media because people are like, that's weird. But also, I think it builds some credibility so that the next time that he says, we do need some money, they can be like, oh yeah, remember that time where he said, I don't need your money right now? And I think even more shrewdly, that email that he sent out did have some asks for people. It was sign up for my YouTube channel, not the Prop 50 YouTube channel, Gavin Newsom's YouTube channel, and sign up for the Gavin Newsom text messages. So there is just dividends that will be paying out well beyond November 4th on that one.
Does seem like he has his eye on something else. All right, let's talk about some specific districts. If Prop 50, or maybe when Prop 50 passes, it will make 4 Republican-held seats significantly more Democratic and 1 more slightly more Democratic. It will also shore up several vulnerable Democratic incumbents. The Republican incumbents on the chopping block are Doug LaMalfa in the 1st District, Kevin Kiley in the 3rd, David Valadao in the 22nd, Ken Calvert in the 40th and Darrell Issa in the 48th. Let's use those one by one, but let's listen to a video from one of the Democratic candidates.
I'm Audrey Denny. Working on the front lines of America's hunger crisis, I've seen firsthand how Republican policies are crushing working families, while billionaires and big corporations cash in on massive tax breaks. The answer isn't sending more career politicians to Washington. We need new leaders who will fight to deliver real change, not more favors for special interests.
That was Democrat Audrey Denny, who has run against LaMalfa in 2018 and 2020. It's going to be a new district with new lines. Melanie, what else is going on in this race?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this district is a great example of one of the major changes that we would see under Prop 50, right? Because this is the northern, north state of California. I mean, for the real California junkies, it's sort of the state of Jefferson territory, which is like the really conservative folks that want to break away from the state of California because they think California is too liberal. So this has been deep red territory. And so when Audrey Denny ran against LaMalfa, even in a wave year like 2018, that was just not going to work. But now this district would become a double-digit Democrat registration district, in part because it sort of scoops all the way down into wine country. So it's really sort of uniting a lot of rural parts of Northern California, but like very different types of rural. And so that is one of the biggest swings that I think. And so there's a lot of intrigue in this area, not just because LaMalfa goes from being pretty safe Republican to somebody who's very much endangered, but also because we could see other entrants like State Senate Leader Mike McGuire, who, of course, the legislature had to approve these maps to put them on the ballot. And wouldn't you know, perhaps there is a congressional seat that looks appealing to him. And so I think that is all of a sudden a Democratic primary becomes way more interesting in that seat than it ever would, because Democrats were never going to win under the old lines.
And do we have a sense from either LaMalfa or other incumbents that are being endangered about whether they're just going to throw in the towel or like that they're going to fight this? And we haven't. The same question goes for some of the new lines in other states that we don't really have a lot of clarity. But what's the sense that you get from some of these Republican incumbents that are endangered?
I don't think that they've certainly not communicated publicly yet. A lot of them are, we're going to fight to defeat Prop 50. And I don't think that they want to sort of signal too early on. But I would be surprised. I don't know if LaMalfa would fully throw in the towel, but somebody like a Kevin Kiley, for example, who is in another Northern California seat that changes a lot. There's a lot of speculation. Does he try to stay in this district, CD3 seat that he'd be in, or does he move over and challenge Tom McClintock, who is another sitting Republican? And so I think that the question is do the endangered Republicans start to do a little bit of district shopping? And that's when you could start seeing some like kind of Republican on Republican violence here, because there are a few Republicans, even under this new map, that would be sitting pretty. And down in Southern California, there's a real potential party conflict that I'm sure we will touch on. But we haven't quite seen everybody fully show their hand yet, because they're trying to still operate under the illusion that this thing's going to fail.
At what point do you think the members of the delegation, the Republican members of the delegation, understood that this thing was probably going through? Because it does seem like at the beginning, Republicans, and we talked to Republicans who were very skeptical that it would pass. They saw those same polls. The Democratic poll, only had it at 52%. There were public polls that had it in the 40s. That had yes in the 40s, still in the lead, but under 50%. It seemed like Republicans at a certain point had started to convince themselves that maybe this thing wasn't actually going to pass. And I'm wondering if and when the actual members of the delegation, to your knowledge, began to realize that this is something they are going to have to contend with very, very soon.
I don't know if I can put like a calendar date to it. I will tell you that just overall, it feels like the sweep of the campaign really started to change around mid-September. That was sort of a moment where I think that the Democratic fundraising machine really kicked into gear. Remember, the interesting thing about this race is that the no side was actually up first. They had mail hitting mailboxes before this thing even qualified for the ballot. And they were on TV before the yes side was. And so there was a lot of panic, I think, on the yes side of, oh no, like they're outspending us. They're already ready to go. Charles Munger already put in $30 million. And remember, on the Democratic side, there was a lot of donor fatigue after 2024. And so there wasn't necessarily a sure deal that they were going to be able to counter and bring in that money. I mean, I remember talking to members of the delegation or people who were close to those members in, I would say, late September, and on the Republican side, and I was sort of needling them, like, "Where's the money, guys? Like, when's this happening?" Even then, they're like, "Oh no, it's coming, it's coming." I stopped hearing that probably around third week of September, maybe like beginning of October. I think that then there was this realization. And look, I mean, the no side basically went dark on television in the last 2 weeks. I mean, if that's not waving the white flag, I don't know what is. And so I do think that around that sort of late September part, it just felt like the writing felt on the wall.
Yeah. Maybe Newsom told Republican donors to stop giving as well. Like it was a double.
I'm sure they'd be happy to listen to him.
Yeah, exactly. That's where they take their marching orders. All right. So you mentioned Kevin Kiley. So if we keep working south in the 3rd district, according to our Inside Elections baseline metric, the 3rd district would go from a Republican advantage of 9 points to a Democratic advantage of 6 points. So a significant shift. Kiley has been very vocal in his frustration, I guess, with Republican leadership pushing redistricting around the country, because this is kind of pushing him out. But Melanie, what else do we need to know about this race?
Well, I think that one of the things that's interesting is because it sort of creeps into the Sacramento suburbs, which is how this seat gets to be more blue tilting. There's a whole roster of ambitious Sacramento area Democrats who are eyeing this race or have already signaled they're getting into this race. And so once again, this shifts from I think Democrats have always seen Kiley as maybe a target, but only under the best of circumstances, to now this is just like a feeding frenzy of all of these Democrats thinking that this is, if not a safe seat, like a pretty winnable race to them. And so to me now, the more interesting stuff is sort of the internal party dynamics when you have, a Richard Pan, who is a former state legislator. There are other rumored state legislators who are thinking about it. There's rumors. There's a city council member in Sacramento who I think has already gotten in. So that'll be very crowded, and that has its own degree of messiness. But in terms of national consequences, it stops being a battleground seat. And so I think it'll get a lot less attention from folks outside of California.
Are you hearing anything about Ami Bera in the 6th district, which got less Democratic, still Democratic leaning, but is essentially now, from a partisanship, I think our baseline score for the new 3rd and the new 6th are equivalent, whereas before the 3rd was very Republican and the 6th was much more Democratic. Have you heard anything about Bera potentially moving over to run in the 3rd?
I know that there has been some chatter about that. And I will say my colleagues who are up in Sacramento have been all over this race, and I've sort of outsourced a lot of that to them. So read California Playbook, because they actually have been all over the latest developments on this one. But I think regardless, I mean, one of the things to remember about Bera is that he actually has been through tough races before. I mean, when he initially won that seat, prior to the 2020 redistricting, like that was a tough race. And he's been able to prove his durability in those tough seats. But again, I think what he has to weigh if he decides that he wants to switch districts is like, how many other Democrats in all of these various seats will he have to contend with?
If we move down to the 13th district, this is represented by Democrat Adam Gray. This is one of the most evenly divided, currently one of the most evenly divided districts in the country. Under Prop 50 and the new map, though, it would be Democratic advantage of at least 7 points on our baseline metric. So it would go from a toss-up to definitely not a toss-up. But what is the feeling, or what's going on the ground? How are Republicans, you think, treating this race with this shift in Democratic performance?
They already were having a hard time finding a great recruit for that race, which has been pretty interesting, given the fact that Gray won by so few votes. You would think that would be like an open invitation to Republicans. And yet, even prior to all of this, their recruiting was pretty unimpressive. Now, I believe, Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there's chatter, or maybe just overtly, that former Stockton Mayor Kevin Lincoln, who had run against Josh Harder, might think about running against Adam Gray in this seat. The thing that's interesting about how the Gray seat has been withdrawn, you're right. I mean, the baseline metrics get better for Democrats, although it's still not it's not a slam dunk. Central Valley is weird, right? I mean, ask every Democrat who thought that they could take David Valadao out. But what
I don't have enough time. That's a long list.
It's a long, long list.
And the only one who did it is unavailable at the moment. So.
Exactly, because otherwise,
literally detained.
Obligations. But what they did draw, and I've talked to people who were closely involved with this, is that they drew a map that more closely tracks with the parts of the San Joaquin Valley that Adam Gray represented when he was in the state legislature. And I think that was something that was important to Gray. I covered Gray when he was a state assemblyman, and more than most, he was a total operator in the way that he would always insert himself into deal making, and would, much to the frustration of his fellow Democrats, but what he would get is a lot of deliverables for that district. UC Merced, which is in his district. And so he's actually quite well known, even among Republicans, as somebody who delivered a lot in Sacramento. And so I think, we look at party registration, we look sometimes at sort of ethnic or racial makeup of a race. But I think sometimes even these geographic boundaries in other subtle ways can tilt a race into a candidate's favor. And I think that's a really good example.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that the Kevin Lincoln chatter. He's currently running against Josh Harder, who he lost narrowly to in the 9th district, but Stockton gets put entirely in the 13th under the new map. And I think that would, if you're a Republican looking for some sort of silver lining in this new map, this is probably it. This is your best takeaway, is that, you get a good candidate against Adam Gray, where they've struggled before. The guy they thought would be the candidate there, the mayor of Ceres, Javier Lopez, I think he's raised like $10 his whole campaign. He's really, it's been a real challenge for him. So if you can get a guy like Lincoln in, who's got a profile and a little name ID and can raise some money, it makes the race more interesting than it is now, even if Gray starts out with a fair number of strengths himself.
Moving a little further south, but still Central Valley, to the 22nd district with David Valadao. District gets about according to our metric, about 5 points better. On the presidential, it's still a district that Trump won narrowly in 2024. Is this enough? Did Democrats redraw this district enough to defeat David Valadao, who has been difficult to defeat in the past?
Probably not. I mean, I'm not saying that in terms of we know what the outcome is going to be, but I think just in terms of how they really changed that district around, I think that they would say that they were constrained by what they could do with that district because of some of the Voting Rights Act, parameters around this, which they did try to say that they were drawing lines that would still be in alignment with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which of course is a whole other question that's going on in the Supreme Court right now. But part of why they did that was they wanted to contrast themselves with Texas, where they thought that those lines were not in alignment with that. And partially it's because they knew in their own sort of internal party politics that with the various civil rights groups, with the various kind of like coalitions, identity groups that are part of the Democratic base, if you were going to say, yes, we're going to fully sort of try and dilute Latino voting power, for example, like that's not going to fly in Democratic Party leadership in the state. So I think because of that, they didn't have a ton of room to roam. And I think what's more important is looking at somebody like a David Valadao. He was already winning in the seat that, registration wise, he had no business winning in. And that had been the case for several cycles, as we alluded to. And I think it's a great sort of like note of caution for all of us as we are like looking ahead. Like, let's say that Prop 50 passes. That does not say automatically 5 seats on the board for Democrats. I mean, the metrics can indicate one thing, but it still is very candidate dependent. It's still very campaign dependent. What I do think will be interesting is we have a pretty raucous Democratic primary. I mean, I'm saying Democratic primary. Hopefully we all are aware that in California, it's a top 2 primary. So, Democrats could theoretically be iced out. But the scuffling right now is going on among Democrats. There's Jasmeet Bains, who is a state legislator, who's kind of the establishment pick. SEIU, the big labor union, is really behind her. She's a pediatrician. They love the idea of having a doctor in a white coat in a year that they're going to be running a lot of ads about Medicaid. Healthcare was part of the reason that David Valdeo lost that one time in 2018. So they're trying to rerun that playbook. But there's also the Randy Villegas, who is sort of a local elected official. He's on a local school board in the district. And he's kind of running an interesting, kind of more populist, kind of Bernie-crat style race. The Working Families Party is really behind him. And so you're seeing some kind of different approaches within the Democratic Party trying to test out their theory of the case in this Central Valley area that has just really bedeviled Democrats for a long time.
And you brought up a great point about I'm getting very frustrated with some headlines or some stories that say, Republicans drew the map in this state and they get 2 more seats or something. Like, no, that's not how it works. We still have to have an election. Lines can be drawn to favor one party or the other, but we still have to have these elections. And so if Prop 50 passes, our mindset is Democrats have the opportunity, a better opportunity to gain between 3 and 5 seats, but not just landing on, all right, D+5, just give it to them. That's not how it works. All right, let's keep moving down. So if the 41st district, which is currently represented by Ken Calvert, shifts dramatically. According to our baseline, this was a district that had a Republican advantage of 7 points to a Democratic advantage of 16 points. Now, I wanted to present, I saw that a Republican consultant, John Fleischman, wrote about the potential that because of this redraw, that in the neighboring 40th district, where Republican Young Kim is, you might have Young Kim running there, Ken Calvert running there, and maybe even Darrell Issa wants to run there because it's a Republican, that is a Republican seat. So I don't know, Melanie, what are you hearing about everything going on in these seats?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's once this initiative, is decided on, and if it passes, that's going to be the area that I'm going to start making, really drawing my attention to, because it is like the rumble in Orange County / Inland Empire. Basically, Ken Calvert's current district just gets obliterated because it was a district that stretched from sort of the conservative parts of the Inland Empire in Southern California, Corona, which is actually Ken Calvert's sort of home base area, but then it extended into the Palm Springs area, and what we saw is that seat, really because of Palm Springs as sort of being the Democratic bastion there, was making that seat more competitive. I mean, that was the seat where you had Will Rollins as a Democrat challenging Ken Calvert twice, and getting pretty close. I mean, I think that people say that Will Rollins was one of the better candidates, better recruits that Democrats had over the last 2 cycles. But the problem is, I think that district still was, tilting towards Republicans, just by the nature of that Inland Empire part. So when you split those 2 sort of areas apart, Ken Calvert doesn't really have anywhere to go. And if I have this right, I think Corona actually is drawn now into that 40th, which is Young Kim's area. So you do have a matchup that's either already just on paper, or it's very easy for him to just skip over the lines into that zone. But Young Kim is one of the few Republicans whose seat actually gets more conservative in this draw. There are a couple of Republicans who get shored up, and that 40th district does become more Republican. And so it's pretty enticing for somebody like Ken Calvert, who is staring at a +16 Democratic seat now, to move over to friendlier territory. And that's what I'm going to find so fascinating, is who traffic cops that? Who, does the party step in? Does Mike Johnson step in? You mentioned the other X factor, which is Darrell Issa, whose seat also becomes much more Democratic leaning. Issa is a billionaire and can very easily self-finance. Does he want to parachute into, the 40th as well? I mean, you could have a real, it's a whole mess for Republicans, and I'm not entirely sure how they're going to sort it out.
While we continue this discussion, the 48th district, which is Darrell Issa's now, moves. It was a very Republican district that now to a almost evenly divided. So it's not a given. When we're talking about how many seats, it's not a given. But it would be maybe more comfortable for him to run somewhere else from a Republican perspective.
And just to like put the final cap on how the 41st got obliterated, that blue dot of Palm Springs gets tacked on now to that 48th. And that's sort of partially what brings it up to that parity and makes it more gettable for Democrats.
Is it too reductive to say that if Ken Calvert and Young Kim ran against each other, does Calvert stand a shot in that race? I mean, this is a guy he's been around, he's been in Congress kind of quietly for 34 years at this point. I think he's got to be one of the longest tenured Republicans in the House. He's in his mid 70s, and he only just started having competitive races 2 years ago after a decade plus of being in a very safe district, versus Young Kim, who's kind of a rising star in the party, and she is younger, she's a woman, she is an immigrant, she is a minority, and Republicans have been so adamant about boosting the diversity in their ranks over the last couple of election cycles. I just think that seems like such a favorable matchup to her. Is there a universe in which Calvert says, I'd rather enjoy the rest of my 70s and 80s in retirement and not in Congress?
I mean, how many members of Congress do we know that will willingly say, I'd rather enjoy my nice retirement? I mean, I do think that's a huge factor that we always have to consider, is like getting people to sort of unilaterally step down from these things. There's not a great track record with that. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think that what you're saying is really reflective, I think, of where a lot of Republican leadership is. I mean, they love Young Kim. They think that she is a gangbusters fundraiser, but she doesn't tonally necessarily match kind of the MAGA wing of the party. She touts how bipartisan she is. And that really worked for her when her seat was more of a toss-up and when Democrats were continually trying to challenge her. And then she got, after redistricting, her seat got more conservative. And in fact, interestingly enough, that first cycle after she got drawn into a more conservative seat, she got a challenge from the right that she had to take pretty seriously. She had to spend about $1 million in the primary to fend off that challenge from the right. And so I do wonder if there's a little bit of a disconnect there between where the sort of party leadership would like, what preferred candidates they have, versus the kind of the voters on the ground, the activists, the grassroots, who are I think the most activated ones are the ones who are a little bit more MAGA. I could see a world in which Calvert sort of taps into that voting base and sort of says, Young Kim was one of the members of Congress that sponsored one of these like immigration compromise bills. Valadao was another one that was on it. She got a lot of heat from, hardcore Republicans in that district. So I could see a scenario in which Calvert tacks to her right. And in a district that is less diverse than the original one that she won, that is more deep red, that could be successful. And that's why I do wonder, is there going to be some sort of intervention from above in the party or Trump or whomever that sort of says, this could get really ugly really quickly. One of you guys has to stand down.
And it's remarkable that we've been, this segment has gone for, 30 plus minutes and we've barely mentioned President Trump. A politics podcast that's barely mentioned Trump, but he could be a factor in, if there are Republican versus Republican, whether it's incumbents or not, if there are Republicans fighting against each other, does he align with somebody and help push them over the top among Republican, primary voters?
I have a quick question, which is, we've seen a number of Democratic incumbents in safe districts face primary challengers in California. You've got Nancy Pelosi, who faces challenge from Saikat Chakrabarti, who is a former AOC chief of staff, as well as State Senator Scott Wiener. You've got Mike Thompson, who's facing a well-funded challenger from venture capitalist Eric Jones. You've got Doris Matsui facing Mai Vang in Sacramento. You've got Brad Sherman facing at least two candidates, though it seems, or did all of them drop out except Jake Levine?
Yeah, one of the Jakes dropped out. So now the main matchup is now Brad Sherman and Jake Levine, who is the son of former Congressman Mel Levine.
Right.
Little known rule in our country: only one Jake per race.
Only one Jake.
They wrote that into the Constitution.
I mean, people don't know that.
The foresight that our founding fathers had, it's really remarkable.
So who is the most vulnerable? Not to put you on the spot here, but if you had to pick one or two of those longtime Democratic incumbents who are facing younger primary challengers, who is the most interesting or who is the most vulnerable in your attention?
Well, okay, I mean, this is maybe cheating. I don't know if I would call it most vulnerable, but I think I think that the real question now is, does Nancy Pelosi run for re-election? And I think that Scott Wiener getting into the race prompted because of the fact that Saikat Chakrabarti was putting such a robust challenge together, I think really, really has like sharpened this question about what Pelosi's future is in this race. I think if you had asked me, in the lead up to the last cycle, lead up to 2024, I really thought that, it looked like she was going on her valedictory like tour. I mean, I was at the state party convention where they were handing out tote bags with her face on it saying, "Thank you, Nancy." I mean, it really looked like she was leaving, and then said, "Actually, I'm running again." I think though that partially because Nancy Pelosi is such a national figure, partially because there is the fact that she's getting this challenge does represent this sort of conversation about the generational frustrations within the Democratic Party, the ideological frustrations within the Democratic Party. And I think that the other thing is that, Scott Wiener, who I covered very closely in Sacramento, he is so, it's not going to be easy to like pin him into an ideological box when you're looking at that race. That race is going to be, I think, hugely consequential nationally, even though it has nothing to do with who controls the House, because I think it will be a tone setter for sort of where the direction of the Democratic Party is. And so that is the one. Maybe it's cheating because I just have a feeling. This is not based on any sort of inside information, but just sort of reading the tea leaves. I have a really hard time thinking, she even appeared with another San Francisco supervisor recently, which then sparked off all of these rumors of, is this her chosen successor? Carmen Chang or Chan, I apologize if I get the name wrong on that one. There's so much speculation that she's trying to already send signals out of maybe who her preferred successor would be, that it feels like this might be the cycle.
I can almost guarantee that because we are talking about this right now, that she will make her announcement between the time that we fully produce this and get this out to the world. So everyone just get ready. It's happening.
If she does that before Prop 50 is voted on, the sound you will be hearing is every California political reporter's head exploding, being like, "You could not have waited."
That's right.
5 days.
You have to do something in between World Series games. You have to have something to occupy your time. And now it's time for our final segment, Look What I Found, where we talk about anything that we've been into recently. Could be books, sports, movies, TV, food. Jacob, what did you find?
So I found the one streaming service where you can watch Denzel Washington in The Equalizer for free, and that is the in-flight entertainment system on United Airlines. And so I availed myself of that opportunity on my flight to California a couple days ago. I'd never seen the movie before, and I had been searching in vain for a way to watch it for not an additional $5 or whatever it is on pay-per-view. And I stumbled onto it on my flight. It's a super goofy movie. It's like one of my favorite genres of movie in which there is no suspense at all because the main character is essentially impervious. There's never even a moment in which he is in danger or is slightly concerned about losing whatever fight he's in the middle of. There's one of the final fights, the other guy gets like 2 punches in, and that's the extent to which Denzel takes any damage throughout the entire movie. There's a real subgenre here. I think The Beekeeper with Jason Statham is another great example of this type of revenge-driven older actor. There's no suspense, but it's still a ton of fun. And so, now I've got to get to The Equalizer 2 and The Equalizer 3, both of which I think are on streaming, and then maybe the Queen Latifah show spinoff, where I think she plays a similar character. So not to give too much promo to the Equalizer franchise, but
I did not expect us to go in this direction with this segment. Is this the same series of Queen Latifah with Steve Martin? Isn't there a movie where I think they're together? It's probably different, probably not related.
Isn't that Father of the Bride?
No, I don't think. I think it's something different. But I'm glad this feels like a void in your life that you are finally filling. I'm glad that we can all be here for this.
I was looking forward to it, but I finally found it. Yeah.
And Alan, our producer, is in the chat saying "Bringing Down the House" is the
Bringing Down. Okay.
Steve Martin movie. Which I don't know, Melanie. Sorry if we took what you found. Is that the movie? Is that what you found?
Yes, that was precisely what I was going to say. Wouldn't that be wild?
Who would have thought?
Yeah, that is real niche. So I'm thrilled for you. Congrats.
What did you find?
I found a show that's been on air for years, and so it is not original. But I kind of had watched it before and rediscovered it, and it's so good. And it just finished, at least in the US, its last season. Slow Horses, which is on Apple TV. It is a British, kind of spy series. Gary Oldman is the star on it, and but it's so funny. It is so sardonically funny and very action. I mean, action packed. It's the perfect kind of brain floss because it's not trying to trick you, but it's also smart enough that you don't feel like it's total junk food to be watching it. And so I find it extremely relaxing to watch. And sometimes you just have to step back and go, that is a well-crafted, enjoyable show. And Slow Horses, this most recent season, I watched it and just was like, well done, you guys. I really enjoyed that. I'm glad I rediscovered it. So if you haven't already watched it, I highly, highly recommend it. And
this show is literally supported by Slow Horses in that my laptop is sitting on a copy of the latest book in the series, the book series, Clowntown, that I have not yet started reading, but brought along with me. So I'm a big fan of the books, big fan of the show as well.
Well, along somewhat similar lines, I found that Hallmark Christmas movies are already available. They're already showing them. This is one of my guilty pleasures, folks. I will admit that, let me give people a little more perspective, that I do a lot of writing at night because it's the only time that my house is quiet. And I need something. I don't like to work in silence, so I need something on. But it can't be too much of a plot. It can't have too much going on that I need to follow. And a Hallmark Christmas movie, there's not a lot of twists and turns in the plot. You kind of know what's going to happen. And so I just put it on and do my political analysis at my computer as that's going. So they're already, if you are already in the Christmas spirit and you were watching, I think we do it through Sling, you can get Hallmark Christmas movies. How many viewers or listeners did we lose from me admitting that, everybody? It's kind of a game, a show ender. But Melanie,
whoever we got from The Equalizer, we've lost from.
Yeah, I'm out. It was an emotional journey through this segment. But Melanie, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the other side of Prop 50.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Please go to InsideElections.com to subscribe to the bi-weekly newsletter. We have individual subscriptions as well as group packages that are tailored to boost association and corporate PACs. If you like today's episode, please hit subscribe, tell your friends and family at your Halloween party. If you're watching on YouTube, click the thumbs up button, click subscribe as well there. We're not opposed to that. If you didn't like today's episode, please email Shohei Ohtani. We also want to thank our producers, Alan Tazinski and Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts, and our associate producer, Conrad Tolosa. Please come back and join us again next time.